We are here today in Dubai with Ms. Daryl Grigorevicius, who is the founder of Stride. I'm not going to introduce Stride. I will let Daryl explain to us what is Stride and how did it come about.
Well, firstly, thank you, Nina, so much for having me. I know you've travelled a long way, so I really appreciate the invitation and the opportunity to meet with you and be here today. So, Stride is my baby. It was born out of my own struggles with autoimmunity, but essentially we are an app, and first and foremost a community, but an app to bridge the gap between conventional and holistic care. So our objective is to provide people with information that they're not getting from the hospitals or their doctors, so that they can help themselves on the way to healing and really get the support that they deserve from the community. I mean, there's a lot more to it than that, but in a snapshot, Stride is designed for people with autoimmunity.
It's a very democratic approach, I would say, to accessing personalized advice and care. Tell me about your own struggles with health, which have led to this idea to have Stride happen.
So for me, I was always a healthy person, and then really out of the blue, because there was no genetic indication or history in my family that would warrant something so significant happening. But when I was 20, I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease. So this was really the end of my world at the time, and I spent a lot of my early 20s dealing with very significant health issues, back and forth to the hospital continuously, week in, week out, long hospital stays. It cost me promotions at work and opportunities in my career because I was deemed unreliable by my managers and top tiers. So, it was a really difficult period of my time between sort of 20 to 25 before I finally got it stabilized through medication. So thankfully, the last 5 years, or the last 4 years really, I was stable. I was able to manage and progress. We moved country and established ourselves here, and life seemed good. Then I fell pregnant with my first baby, a son called Jagger. But after he was born, I then started getting other symptoms, new symptoms that were initially sort of led back to my disease being dynamic, because joint pain is associated with Crohn's disease as well, but it was also attributed to postpartum issues. But it was established about 18 months later that I actually had drug-induced lupus caused by the medication I was taking for my Crohn's. So everything was interconnected, and it was really over that decade that I became my own wellness expert in my condition and made changes to improve my health and, slowly make a lifestyle that supported me in a healthier way. But after the second diagnosis, and I think it's actually quite common if you have an autoimmune condition to receive a second diagnosis as well, or multiple even, and we've got people in the community who some have 4 different diseases, all autoimmune related, but I think it's about 25% of people that end up with more than one. So I feel grateful in a sense that my lupus diagnosis was drug-induced, and it took time, but after I removed the instigating drugs, it took about 6 months, but the pain did eventually subside, and I am now back to being what I feel like my usual self, but this whole journey led to the creation of Stride, and it was all through me seeking support for myself. It was actually never meant to be a business to begin with.
Like we spoke before, chronic diseases generally impact quality of life, and like with food allergy families, often mothers have to stop their careers and look after children with life-threatening food allergies. And in your case, your peers and your managers, you mentioned, were quite either dismissive or cruel when it comes to understanding your condition.
I was embarrassed, really embarrassed. I was young, I didn't really understand it, and I was given very little information on how to manage things or what it was from my doctors. It was just, take this medication, you'll be fine, get on with it sort of thing. Like, they don't actually explain the root cause or tell you what you could be doing better. I remember very vividly that I was sent away with a list of foods to eat, and this makes me laugh today knowing what I do now, but it had things like pizza, bread, pasta, cake, foods that are easy
All
to
the
digest.
inflammatory.
And all inflammatory, but now I look on the Facebook groups and I see people who are undergoing colonoscopies, and obviously you can only eat certain things for the prep, and they've got bottles of Sprite and hard candy sweets, and I'm thinking, why is the doctor saying, allowing this? You should be sent home with a list that is more appropriate. So yeah, anyway, that still happens today, but it blows my mind. And I didn't ever speak about my condition to anyone because I didn't want to be stigmatized. I wanted to be a normal young person. My friends didn't understand, and I kept it very much to myself until I got my second diagnosis. So for nearly 10 years, I only spoke about it amongst very close family and my husband.
And tell us about that incident which we mentioned earlier in our private conversation about a doctor who saw you as a 29-year-old and had a particular comment to make.
So this was when I was admitting myself to emergency because of really extreme pain that was targeting my joints, my ligaments, my muscles, but also then went to my organs. So by this point, I was already in and out of the hospital for months on end, but without answers. And this doctor, one morning, waking up in emergency, said, "You look great. You look fine. Go home, you're going to be just fine," and patted me on the head and sent me on my way.
And isn't that the most condescending thing a doctor can tell a patient who is in pain, in their ward?
It was just, you're not being believed, essentially, because I present as a young woman who has always looked like this on the outside. I'm fine, I'm well, you look healthy. People used to say to me all of the time, especially as a new mum, "How have you lost so much weight? You look amazing. You look incredible. I wish I had your condition because I'd love to."
Pretty condescending, actually, yeah.
Yeah, all of these things. And then you start to question yourself. And I just, on that day, that morning when I was sent home, knowing at the time, honestly, I thought I was going to die in my sleep because it was also, I had pleurisy on my lungs. I was really struggling to breathe. And these people just weren't taking me seriously.
And you knew at that point there must be another way.
Yes, so I did go back to emergency again for probably the fourth time in a row. The following morning, and I said, look, so the guy that patted me on the head, the doctor, he was a part of a team of 5 specialists that I was working with at the time. And thankfully, the others were a bit more interested and willing to help. So I had a lovely rheumatologist who would travel to see me in hospital after her shift. She was really amazing, and she supported me a lot to get the answers that I needed, requesting the test. But it took 2 more weeks after that moment to find out what was triggering it, which was the drug-induced lupus.
So the patient-doctor's bad mannerism is also very important for every sort of autoimmune condition.
100%. I think it's really crucial that if you are going through health issues, unexplained symptoms, whatever it looks like for you, that you have a very good rapport with your doctor, that you feel like you're being heard, that you feel like you're validated, because otherwise you bury your head in the sand. You start to get health anxiety. You don't want to visit the doctor because from your experience, unfortunately, you're dismissed. You're being told it's psychosomatic, or it's all in your head. And this is why it's so important. And I say to all of our community members, if you are not happy with the outcome, get a second, third, fourth opinion if you need to. I think everyone should do that anyway, because you should get a general consensus and make sure that the information you're getting and the advice is aligned with what you want as a patient as well. And I think that's also something that a lot of people miss, is that they heed the advice of their doctor, they take the medications they prescribe, but they never ask themselves, what do I want out of my healing journey?
That's a beautiful message. That's a really crucial message of participating in the choice.
100%, yeah.
Being given a choice, but then taking the ownership of participation as well.
And it's also knowing what questions to ask. And this is also something that we do sessions on at Stride, is that we give you a list, a printable download. And it sounds like such an obvious thing, but you have all of these other things in your mind, such a lack of energy, you're fearful, you're uncertain, you're scared, you don't want to even think about the future because you don't know what it holds. I remember having a conversation with my husband when I was really sick, and he said, let's go for coffee. because you're like, you just need a break. Let's just go and have some space, not think about anything. And he sat me down that day, we had a newborn, and said, if you're not going to be with us that long, I want to make sure that your days are the rest of your days are as best as they can be. And at that moment I thought, damn, this is really serious now, because my husband is thinking this way.
He was very concerned, and was that a turning point for you?
I mean,
one of the turning points.
One of the turning points, yeah. That combined with my son visiting me in hospital was enough for me to say, okay, this isn't about me anymore. I have people in my household, my son, that need me. And yes, I need to be healthy for myself, but I also need to be a mother and a wife. And I had all of the support I needed. So, yeah, here I am 3 years later, with a much better quality of life, back to feeling like myself. And that's also one of the key objectives of Stride, is to get people back to a place where they can feel like themselves again.
So tell me about the community which you built, because it's not easy to live in a foreign country, to go through your own health challenges in the new environment, and to build a community. So how did you begin to build a community, and tell us about your community?
Well, it's a little bit by accident, to be honest, because I sent one WhatsApp. So how it works in Dubai is that everyone has a private gated community, most people. So we all have community WhatsApp groups. You know, we lend things, borrow things, complain about things. And when I came home, I thought, although my husband is amazing, I really need to speak to someone who gets it, who can really sit across the table from me and say, I understand. So I sent one message to our local community and said, hey, I'm Daryl, this is what I have. Is anyone else experiencing something similar? Would love to meet. And this is the first time, remember, that I'd ever done this, because I was always a very closed book, so it was a big thing for me. And I had 5 replies to that one message, all women, saying, I have this, I have that, I have this, I have that, would love to meet. And they were less than 5 minutes away from my doorstep.
Wow, that is amazing.
So I met all of these people, we had incredible conversations, it was so open, you know, so authentic. It was like they needed this as much as I did. So then I went a little bit further afield to Facebook forums, to other communities, and that 5 people turned into 25 people, then 50 people. And it really grew very organically. So when I realized that I definitely was not alone, which is what I'd felt for a very long time, I thought, just something needs to happen here. We need to get these people together. So that was how the community was born.
Was there any intersection with the local community and that language barrier? How was that being transcended, if in any way?
It wasn't really an issue. You know, we're lucky in that everyone in Dubai speaks English. So I was surprised actually to have, so when we started doing events, which was probably 6 to 8 months after I started those initial meetings, we had local Emirati women join, and they were very reserved to start with. You know, they didn't really get involved in the conversation. It was more sit back, but then I was so happy to see them return again and again and again. And now these are people who I speak to one-on-one, we're friends, and I built very strong personal relationships with nearly all of the early members that joined our community. And that's something that I really want to keep as we start to grow. I mean, obviously from a scalability perspective, it's no longer possible for me to meet everyone one-on-one, but what we're trying to build with the platform is that personal connection, is that relatability, is that option to keep each other accountable. So we do goal setting together, we do touch points in person, through webinars as well, because now we have people on the platform outside of the region. So yeah, I mean, for me it grew more quickly than I was ever anticipating, and it's definitely a learning curve every day. I am learning all of the time, but it's been a really incredible journey, and I truly believe that patients are the most underutilized resource in healthcare. I think I said to you earlier today that I learned more in 1 year of meeting each of these people than I did in a decade of meeting a whole host of different doctors.
If you could give yourself one advice to yourself of 18 months ago, what would it be?
To speak up, for sure, because autoimmunity is on the rise, and nearly everyone I speak to either says to me, I have something like that, or I know someone that does, or my children has this. And it's just, I am still shocked to this day at how many people it impacts, whether it's a celiac disease, whether it's Hashimoto's or something more severe. You know, autoimmune is so broad, and that's why I structured the community that way, because you do have communities and charities for MS, for diabetes, for Crohn's disease, you know, huge UK charity for Crohn's and IBD. But what about the other 85 autoimmune conditions? Because now scientists are realizing that they used to think it was 80, now they know it's about probably 120, and there's more and more that they're realizing because the symptoms and the markers are so grey. You know, we're still waiting to find out whether PSOS is an autoimmune and all of these other things. So there were so many other sufferers that I wanted to encompass everyone into this inclusive umbrella, because I think regardless of what your title is of your condition, you probably have information or advice or tips that you can share with others. So for sure, my number one advice would be speak up, because in hindsight, I know I could have done so many more things to help myself earlier than I did. But also to take control of your own health, like we spoke about earlier, you know, be involved, participate, educate yourself, empower yourself, and you will be, you know, you look after your body all day, every day, and there is so many things you can do to alleviate your symptoms, if not reverse them.
I think this is a very powerful message to everybody listening. Tell me about males in your community. Is it mostly female focused? Perhaps because females are more likely to speak up, but how do you anticipate reaching out to more males in this space?
It's a bit tricky, particularly in this region, I think. I mean, the male health industry, they always say that men are diagnosed much later because they simply just don't go to the doctor. But that's also why it was very important to me to have it as an inclusive community. Yes, we are largely women because, as you say, autoimmunity does affect far more females than males, at around 80%. But we do have males in the group and they participate where they can, but they're definitely less involved, I'd say, than the females. And we have to make space for that in time. It's one of the things that's on our future trajectory for the business, because we'd like to get to a point where we can, if necessary, host female and male focus groups. I think sometimes if a man is less likely to come to a group setting if they know that they may only be the one man there, sort of thing. So yes, that's something I would like to do to encourage them to come along a bit more in the future.
And in terms of educational resources, tell me what is in the pipeline?
Well, this has been an ongoing
growth space.
Yes, honestly, because we've had, we get feedback from members, we do sessions, request feedback. So I always want to make sure that we're building specifically for community needs. I mean, I can do so much because I am a patient myself, but I'm only one. So it started with just science-backed resources, giving people access in one place to everything autoimmune related, from just foundational resources to more in-depth complex matters to condition-specific resources, which we launched as well more recently, giving people access to information around specific issues like stoma bags, surgery, because otherwise it takes so much time. You have to look across 50 different websites, which may or may not have similar or the same information, and then eventually you give up because it's confusing. So we make
disheartening as well.
Yeah, and disheartening, and it's just an entire nightmare. So we wanted to really become a one-stop shop for everything autoimmune related. So that's something that we're still building out and will continue to do so. But then another question that came to mind is like, okay, so we have all of this great information now that people can read, but it still takes effort. You still have to look through it. What people really want is a solution, is a step-by-step, this is what you need to do to get better. So this is something that we're working on right now. Next month, actually, we'll launch our first course, which is around the foundations of healing. This is all about mindset. This is preparing yourself mentally, preparing yourself emotionally, spiritually, to be ready for the significant lifestyle changes that you're going to need to commit to for long-term wellness.
I love this. It's a mental health preparation for the resilience that you need to build on to get yourself and your loved ones better.
Yes. And, we also cater to caregivers. I think this is something I always like to acknowledge, because whether it's been my mum or my husband, which have been the two pillars in my recovery journey or my health journey overall, you forget about them. People forget about them. They never ask how they are. They always ask how I am. And they're the ones who are doing the reading when I'm not able to, doing the cooking when I'm not able to, stepping in. My husband also had a newborn and a full-time job to manage, as well as taking me to the hospital and making sure I had whatever I needed delivered late at night. So we're also a space for community caregivers to get together and say, do you know what, this is really hard work.
Acknowledging that effort and need to help each other. I love the fact you're breaking down barriers and silos in this space. Let's have another chat in about 6 to 8 months' time to see how everything is progressing. And thank you very much for your time and for being on Immunity Group Australia's podcast today.
Thank you so much. Yes, hopefully in another 6 to 8 months we'll have the full programme, and I'll tell you exactly where we're at. Maybe you can invite a member to speak and give a testimonial. That would be great as well. But really appreciate you having me, and it's been great to chat today.
Thank you so much.